Okay, so this is the first time that I've ever done like a step-by-step art tutorial in my style, of course. But before we get started, let me introduce myself for those of you who don't know me. I'm a cartoonist and animator from the internet, and today I'll be teaching you how to draw fruits. There's 8 lessons planned out in total, and each one will cover a single fruit. Now I was going to do these 8 fruits in chronological order based on how I learned them. But then I realized that would make this a really boring experience because the first 6 are actually pretty easy and then the last 2 are extremely hard. So instead I shuffled it up, and now we now start with lesson 3, which is the easiest one of the bunch. Lesson 3, the orange. Okay, oranges are great because they're literally just circles. So here's the very first tip. Always try to simplify the shapes in your drawings as much as possible. If something can be represented by a circle, use a circle. If it can be represented by a square, use a square, etc. It's okay if you get the shape slightly wrong, but if you're using a complex shape where a simpler one would do, you're going to get a weird result. So I like to start my oranges at the top view, which means we only have to worry about height and width. We don't have to worry about thickness yet. So the very first thing we gonna do is draw a circle, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't even have to be a circle. You can see that mine is more of an oval. And since I'm still teaching the basics, I always recommend drawing lightly at first. This way you can always go over it again later and make it darker. Next, add another circle overlapping it. Now this represents the bottom half of the orange, the part that's under the stem. And remember, these are supposed to be circles, not ovals. So if you're getting wonky lines, just trace around some circular objects. Then add a small circle at the top. This is the stem. Try to make all the lines nice and smooth. If there's any rough spots, just keep tracing until you get it right. Now, depending on your drawing, you may or may not need this next step, but I like to add a little wedge on the side. This is where the orange was cut open, the part that's missing. This is entirely optional though. So if you want, you could skip ahead to the coloring section and miss this part altogether. If you want to add this little triangle, then do it now. And also at this point, feel free to go back through and darken any of the lines that you want to be thicker. Now you're ready to color it in. For my color choices, I usually stick to 2 colors per fruit, 1 light and 1 dark. That way it's easier for beginners. And the light color for oranges is of course orange. The dark color is kind of up to you, but I went with brown. So I added a thin outline, colored it in, then filled the center circle with brown as well. Now it looks like an orange. Okay, so at this point you should take a look at your drawing and think about what it needs to improve. What can you change to make it look better? For me, I want to fix my horizon line. It's a little wavy. Also, I want to smooth out these lines a bit, and then I'm gonna redraw the little stem thing. Then I'll add a couple of leaves. These are just little wedges. It doesn't have to be perfect. Finally, I'm gonna add a couple of light lines through the orange. These are just the seeds inside the fruit, and now I'm happy with how it turned out. Okay, that's it for the orange. Make sure to practice drawing it from multiple angles, and once you're comfortable with that, move on to lesson 4. Lesson 4, the grape. Okay, so grapes are made up of many smaller circles, and that might seem intimidating. But the reality is, it's much easier than it looks. In fact, this is one of the easiest drawings that you can make. First, draw the main cluster of grapes. This is a circle. Next, add a couple of smaller circles on top of it. These are the individual grapes. You don't have to be precise. Just get the basic shape down. And notice that I'm starting to connect the dots. This is very important. Whenever you draw something that has many different parts, start by connecting the overall shapes and then fill in the details later. You can even start to color it in at this point. It doesn't have to be perfect, just get the basic shapes colored. At this point, you'll probably realize that you need to add more grapes to the drawing. So do that. I usually just add them in little groups of 3. And this gives you an opportunity to fix anything that's looking weird. And at this point, you can darken the lines if you want, and you can also smooth them out a bit. You can see that I got some pretty shaky lines here. So I'm just going to erase them and redraw them again. And you'll notice that I'm not drawing every single grape individually. I'm just drawing clumps of them. Grapes come in bunches. They're rarely ever alone. So don't feel like you have to draw every single detail. If something looks good enough, it probably is. You can also darken the lines if you want. I did that on this one. You can also smudge the pencils. If you want to get fancy, you can even start adding some shading at this point. I'm not doing that, but if you want to try it, go for it. Now I'm going to finish up the coloring, and once I'm satisfied with that, I'm going to add my final details. I like to start with the stems. I usually make them a lighter shade of green. And then I'll add a couple of leaves. These are just little wedges. Finally, I'll add some light lines throughout the grapes. These represent the texture on the surface of the grapes. And if you want, you can add some shadow on the bottom grapes. That's up to you though, and now my grape looks good. Okay, that's it for the grape. Make sure to practice drawing it from multiple angles, and once you're comfortable with that, move on to Lesson 5. Lesson 5. The apple. Okay, apples are another great example of using simple shapes to represent complex objects. The first thing you want to do is draw the overall shape of the apple. And I like to start with the top view so I can ignore the thickness. So I'm drawing a circle. Next, add another circle overlapping it. This is the bottom half of the apple. Notice that I'm making these lines super smooth. This is important when drawing fruit. They have a soft texture. So avoid sharp corners or edges. Instead, make everything nice and curvy. Then add a thin line down the center. This is the stem. Then add a larger circle at the bottom. This is where the apple was cut off. Then draw a couple of smaller circles around it. These are the seeds. Again, you could skip this part if you want. It's entirely optional. Next, I'm going to add some light lines through the apple. These represent the texture on its surface. You don't have to worry about getting them perfect. You don't even have to get the shape of the apple perfect either. I mean, it's a circle. You can't really screw it up. You can start coloring it in now if you want. I chose red for the main color and brown for the seed pocket. Now it's starting to look like an apple. At this point, I'm going to add some shadow on the bottom half. This isn't necessary, but I like to do it. Then you can thicken any of the lines if you want. I drew all of mine pretty thick. You can also smooth them out if you need to. I've got some pretty shaky lines there. And you can see that I'm not coloring in every single part of the apple. It's okay if you leave some parts white. You don't have to color everything. Just color what you need to color. Finally, I'm going to add some leaves on top. These are just little wedges, and I only made one leaf. It's okay if you don't add any leaves. It's entirely up to you. But if you do, make sure you color them in. Okay, now I'm happy with how it came out. So that's it. Move on to Lesson 6. Lesson 6, the banana. Okay, bananas are great because they're just squiggly lines and curves. No straight lines whatsoever. So the first thing you want to do is draw the general shape. I like to start with the top view so I can ignore the thickness. And you can see that I'm drawing a series of overlapping curves. Each curve is a little bit higher than the last. And this creates the tapered effect of a banana. Once you've got the overall shape down, you can start to add some more detail. Now you can darken the lines if you want. I did that on this one. You can also smooth them out if you need to. I've got some pretty shaky lines here. You can start coloring it in now if you want. I chose yellow for the main color and brown for the stem. And you'll notice that I'm not coloring in every single part of the banana. That's okay. You don't have to color everything. And finally, I'm going to add a little leaf on top. This is just a little wedge. I didn't color it in because I didn't feel like it. You can do that too. If you don't want to color it, just leave it white. Okay, now I'm happy with how it came out, so that's it. Move on to Lesson 7. Lesson 7, the strawberry. Okay, strawberries are kind of complicated. So don't get discouraged if it takes you a few tries to get it right. I like to start with the top view so we can ignore the thickness. First thing I'm doing is drawing the overall shape. This is a hexagon. I know it looks like an octagon, but it's actually a hexagon. Next, I'm going to draw the seeds. Strawberries are unique in that their seeds are on the outside of the fruit. So it's important that you focus on that. Each corner of the hexagon represents a seed. I'm drawing little triangles pointing outwards. Each one of these points represents a seed. You can start coloring it in now if you want. I chose red for the main color and green for the leaves. You can also thicken the lines if you want. I did that on this one. You can also smooth them out if you need to. And finally, I'm going to add the little stem thing. This is just a little wedge. I didn't color it in because I didn't feel like it. You can do that too. If you don't want to color it, just leave it white. Okay, now I'm happy with how it came out, so that's it. Move on to Lesson 8. Lesson 8, the watermelon. Okay, watermelons are kind of intimidating, but they're really not that bad. I like to start with the top view so we can ignore the thickness. First thing I'm doing is drawing the general shape. This is a circle. Next, I'm going to draw the seeds. Watermelons have black seeds. They're very distinctive. So you want to pay attention to that. I'm drawing little squares. Every square represents a group of seeds. They're never drawn individually. You can start coloring it in now if you want. I chose red for the main color and green for the rind. You can also thicken the lines if you want. I did that on this one. You can also smooth them out if you need to. I've got some pretty shaky lines here. Next, I'm going to add some light lines through the watermelon. These represent the texture on the surface. You don't have to worry about getting them perfect. You don't even have to get the shape of the watermelon perfect either. I mean, it's a circle. You can't really screw it up. Finally, I'm going to add the little stem thing. This is just a little wedge. I colored it in because I felt like it. You can do that too. If you don't want to color it, just leave it white. Okay, now I'm happy with how it came out, so that's it. You've learned how to draw 8 different fruits. Congratulations! I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and I hope you learned something new. If you did, please share this video with your friends and family and consider subscribing to my channel. I make content about art and animation and music. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you next time. Bye!